Stay free with me, Russell Brand.
I believe, generally speaking, Joe, in order to significantly change the world, we have to find a way of cooperating and decentralizing, of recognizing that people have perhaps complementary but very different cultural identities. And one of our priorities must be to diffuse the culture war, to stop squabbling about the differences between traditionalism and progressivism, except that there's different strokes for different folks, and that you're going to have in a country as vast as the United States communities that have vastly different views on a range of cultural issues. But in order to make any progress at this moment, we're going to have to start addressing where real power is centered. And it seems to me that there is state power in Washington, there is the power of the pharmaceutical industry and the huge influence that they are able to exert both financially and now sort of politically. It seems there is big tech and the ability to sort of create a surveillance state where and where there appears to be a porous membrane between big tech and the government, with like high level acknowledged and demonstrated infiltration of big tech by various government agencies. And what concerns me, and has done for a while, is the challenge of overcoming a hegemony without a counter-hegemony, i.e. the old argument was that the only thing that could possibly defeat free market capitalism or late capitalism or corporatism, whatever you want to call this now, is some kind of centrist, state-led left-wing project. But with the fall of the Soviet Union, with a sort of total suspicion and lack of interest, most significantly in America, for politics of the old left, and a sort of a general sense that people don't want to be told what to do by any central authority now. How do we use these ideas that are about individual awakening to create and coordinate a decentralized countercultural movement that doesn't sound like it's being made up on the spot by people that just like dream catchers and eating Beyond Meat burgers?
I mean, if you study the neuroscience of culture, it's so unique because we share the same biology, we share the same brain, and because we share the same biology and the same brain, we have certain universal traits that are unique to human beings. We smile when we're happy, we frown when we're sad, we sleep at night for the most part, we grab a stick with an opposing thumb. So structure and function are highly related, and those are universal traits. And then we have our individual traits, and that's kind of like how the brain is wired, right? That's like our fingerprint as opposed to our hand, right? So we have an individual series of traits and that make us unique, and we have our universal traits. But what bridges the universality of us, the commonality as human beings, with our individuality? And that's culture. And culture really is defined for the most part by the past. What has worked over generations are traditions that have sustained the culture based on one thing. And that one thing is environment. So a culture in northern Mongolia is certainly different than a culture in central Mexico because it's a different environment. And those different customs that are created from that environment allow that culture to sustain itself. So look at great people in history that changed the culture, whether it was Gandhi, whether it was William Wallace, whether it was Joan of Arc, whether it was Martin Luther King, whoever it was that changed the culture. What they did really well is they showed people that there was an alternative future that they could actually believe or perceive in their mind. Now, you can't see that future if you're living by the same emotions of the past. And for most people, they live by the emotions of the past. What you have to do is you got to get people out of their resting state. They have to become inspired. They have to become enthusiastic and theos, filled with God. They have to become motivated in some way. They have to be moved. And when they are moved emotionally, then that energy, that emotion causes them to see the same future as that leader sees. And when you get people seeing that same future and they have that clear intention, and you combine that with a different emotion, you're changing people's state of being. Now, get enough people doing that, and what happens is you get an emergent consciousness. An emergence in biology is such a phenomenal thing because when you see a group of birds or a flock of birds flying in the same direction, or a school of fish moving together, they appear as a larger organism. When you study that principle in biology, you think that there's a leader that everybody's following, that it's a top-down phenomenon. In fact, it's not. It's a bottom-up phenomenon, and everybody's leading. Everybody's behaving in the same way, and the appearance of a larger organism becomes more sustainable for that species. So we have such a stigma in our minds that if you lead with too much passion, you're going to get it in the end, whether you're Jesus Christ or Abraham Lincoln or William Wallace, whoever it was. The outcome for truth is usually you lose your life. But the real question is, what if everybody's leading? And you just can't take out everybody now. So this is a really important time, because the emergent consciousness that has to take place has to be built on principles. And the principles that people can actually wrap their mind around, they have to keep their mind on it for a period of time where they're not distracted by technology. They're not distracted by TikTok, and they're not distracted by social media, and they're not distracted by the news. That the eminent condition of the world right now and the way things are going based on self-interests are all based on survival, and you can control people when you control their emotions. And when you control their emotions, you control their attention. And if you can capture a person's attention, you can capture their energy, because where you place your attention is where you place your energy. And so you could actually program people to do anything based on the emotion that they feel. And fear is a great emotion to cause people to rely on some authoritative figure to lead them away. So if there's a new consciousness that emerges that is based on not fruits and nuts, and not not on crystals, not on colonics, not on any of those things, but this is game time. This is where something else has to be born in human beings that is already innate in us, and that is the power to organize as a species. When we begin to heal one another, when we begin to inform one another, when we begin to respect one another, when we begin to shine for one another, when we begin to stand up for one another, when we begin to abilities and then demonstrate to people that there are other ways of doing things and share that right information, I think an emergent consciousness will actually take place. And God, I think this is the time in history more than ever where it matters the most.
I like that answer, Joe. I like it a lot. I like that. I like the analogy of the movement of an organism. I like the challenge to our assumptions around what material rationalism posits an individual must be. The preeminence of the idea of separateness. I like that you allude to the idea that we are being sustained at a kind of negative frequency level by a culture of fear and desire, which are of course designated often as the emotional states that are most likely to lead to panicked action or inertia or freeze. I like the idea that we could and must overcome our typical requirement for idolatry, that there has to be a sort of a figurehead. And I like that in spite of that leadership can be shared and leadership can be cooperative, and indeed it must be if we're going to truly create new models. And in order to do that, we have to have a shared set of values, and we have to be willing to overcome this current tendency towards extreme divisiveness, extreme judgment, invective, incendiary rhetoric. All of this has to be overcome. So there is clearly a sort of requirement, Joe, for us to be able to hold that apparent paradox that, that we are in one way insignificant. An individual in limitless space is insignificant, but as a point of attention, all reality is held within my individual consciousness. There is nothing that is real that I know about that isn't held within the field of my awareness. Therefore, the totality of my reality is held within my individual nature. And if I'm not able to form meaningful connections to other people, then it becomes a solipsistic and separate reality. I like that you sort of talked about visions and visionaries, that if we are able, Dr. Joe should come to Community 2023. I'm going to ask him in a second. If we can elicit and articulate a shared vision, then that can be our mandala, that can be our totem, that can be what we sort of head towards together. And that's really what I'm trying to sort of understand. And at the moment I'm doing like a lot of it in sort of when talking about American politics and American culture war. I'm trying to cultivate a sense that you have more to gain by forgiving and loving the people that you perceive to be on the other end of a cultural spectrum to you than you have by vanquishing them. That is not your enemy. That is not your enemy.
Yeah.
Watch entire episodes on demand for free at rumble.com/Russell Brand.